Early voting is something that's relatively new to the US. It started maybe about 20 years ago and has gained a lot of popularity in those 20 years. It kind of cuts down on lines and time spent voting, and also gives more people the opportunity to vote. Absentee balloting, absentee voting, or mail-in voting has been around for quite a while. Some states do all of their vote by mail, but in all of the states, you can ask for an absentee ballot if you're not going to be able to make it physically to the voting place on election day or during early voting. Some states require an excuse, like being on military service or being disabled. Many states offer no excuse. And all of those absentee ballots, we expect right now, early voting is half. In 2020, early voting is half of the total vote of what we had in 2016. So we expect a tremendous turnout, especially through early voting and absentee voting.
Some of our viewers are curious, when are both the early votes and absentee ballots counted?
The early votes and absentee votes are not counted until election day, until November 3rd. And because of so many absentee ballots, so many physical pieces of paper that have to be accumulated and then processed on election day, we will not likely get an absentee ballot count until several days after election day.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the actual election day, November 3rd, when does voting traditionally stop, and when are official results expected?
Traditionally, 6:00 p.m. on the East Coast is when the first two states close their polls. That's Kentucky and Indiana. And then after 6:00 on the East Coast, states start closing polls at 7:00, 8:00, and all the way through as the time zones close, as states in various time zones across the US close their polls. You know, it won't be until after 11:00, 12:00 that we'll have all of the polls that are closed. And as far as results are concerned, the results from the early states come in fairly quickly after 6:00, and we probably won't know for sure whether or not there will be a winner until probably 11:00 at night, East Coast time in the US.
So many times we get to know who is winning through the mainstream media that would be keeping tallies throughout the day. But actually, is there an entity that is tasked with making the formal announcement, as is the case with many African countries? They have electoral commissions.
It's one of the interesting and dynamic parts of the democracy here is there's no organization, there's no government commission that will say President Trump won or former Vice President Biden won. It's really all about the numbers, and each state is responsible for holding their elections and their election rules. So it's very decentralized, and the result is it's really left up to the media to take a look at the numbers and say, candidate X won these states and candidate Y won these states, and it adds up to the Electoral College necessary number of 270. And you won't find any government source to be able to say or come out and say, so-and-so won the election.
Very interesting. So what happens in a situation where the results are not clear, say by the next day or even several days after?
It becomes a very interesting post-election season. The news cycle is very heightened, and what happens is everybody is looking to see what is holding up the count and why is the vote count slowed down. And there may be legal challenges. In 2000, that happened with the Bush versus Gore election, where in Florida it came down to 537 votes that separated the two, and every single vote seemed like it had its own day in court. So it could drag out, if it's very close in a very key state, it could drag out for weeks, maybe more than a month.
Thank you very much, Steve. Thank you.
You're welcome.